This is Nancy Roffman, and it's June 21st, 2006. I am here today to interview Harmon Schepps in his home at 5815 Portsmouth Lane in Dallas, Texas, for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Mr. Schepps, do you want to start off with a story?
Yes, I do. Something I heard over television a week or so ago, maybe you heard it, and I won't repeat it to you, but I thought it was interesting and I'd like to share it with somebody. A young lady, 18 years old, graduating high school in this out California area. And she, 18 years before, a police officer in that town noticed the paper bags laying in some green grass. Have you heard it?
I haven't heard it.
He noticed that the bag was moving. Something was causing it to move inside. It was real cold outside. He went over, looked in, and there was a baby, freshly born baby. He grabbed his jacket, took his jacket off real quick and wrapped it up and rushed to the emergency hospital. And the baby was 90 degrees at the time. She's already that cold. She was adopted by a couple, and after 9 years, the couple got a divorce. And then one of them kept the baby. I don't have all the story exactly right, but the one that kept her, she had got cancer after 3 or 4 years and died. And then I don't know who took care of the young lady. But she made it through the years and was graduating high school. And at the higher echelons of the class, she might have been a valedictorian, I think. I'm not sure, though. And very pretty girl, very smart, been accepted by 5 different universities to go to attend if she wanted to attend to them. And and the policeman was there who saved her 18 years before and brought her a gift. And guess what the gift was?
What was it?
The jacket that he wrapped around her that morning to save her.
Isn't that a nice story?
And I thought it was a very unusual story, a very touching story, and I thought I wanted to share it with you.
Well, thank you very much. Let's talk now a little bit about your life.
I got to tell you one more story. I called my brother this morning in Houston, who's 96 years old and in very good health. And I asked him a question. I was debating whether to shave or not. I asked him a question, and on June the 7th, 1944, I'm sure that he was well shaved that morning that they took off for Normandy. And I wondered how long it was before he got to shave again. And he said it was 8 or 9 days. And I said, well, I'm debating about whether I want to shave today. I thought it ain't too bad. And he said, well, I go around the house sometime the whole week without shaving now. I don't have anybody to see it. Doesn't do it. So I'm not shaved. That's what my story today. Now I'm ready for you.
It doesn't matter. We're happy to see you. We want to talk a little bit about you and your life. So tell me how and when your family first came to Dallas.
My dad came here in about 1910 or 11. And I don't know whether he came through New York or and he came with one of my sisters and 2 of my brothers. My mother came here in 1913 with another group of brothers and one daughter, and that made 9 altogether here. And she had 2 more children after she got here. And she came in 1913, and she landed at Galveston and came to Dallas immediately, where my dad had a brother who was successful in the baking business here, Schepps Baking Company. Well, anyhow, my dad went into the dairy business in 1913, milking some cows and selling raw milk bottled with, and he ran that dairy until 1939, when he decided to cease distributing bottled milk, and decided to sell his milk direct to another handler where they pasteurized milk. It had gotten where people didn't want to drink raw milk, and that was 1939, and then March of 41, the man that the dairy that was buying his milk decided they didn't need the milk, and cut him off. He had to find another outlet for his milk. He delivered that milk started delivering the milk to a cheese plant, where he took a greatly reduced price for it. And that gave me an opportunity. Our brother and I had another brother older than me that was out of a job, and I was out of a job too, and I managed to borrow $400, and I told my dad my brother and I would like to buy his milk if he'd sell it to us, and he'd get the original class 1 price for the milk that he was getting before, and he agreed to do that. Anyhow, that was the beginning of me and my brother in the business of Schepps Dairy, and where I stayed for 44 years. And my brother dropped out after 18 years, and then I sold out in 1985.
So let me just clarify for a minute. Were you one of the children who were born here in Dallas? Were you born here in Dallas?
Yes.
You were one of the younger children.
Me and one more brother were born here in Dallas. That made a total of 11 children. And
where did you live? Where did your family live?
Well, in the beginning, they lived over on what was called 8th Street at the time, but it's called 11th Street today in Oak Cliff. And from that, they lived there from about 1915 until 1991. At that time, somebody leased the place, the dairy farm, away from us, and we had to move, and I moved to 2nd Avenue, 5200 blocks 2nd, and we started pasteurizing milk, and Schepps Dairy started booming at that time.
So you lived on the dairy farm? Is that when you were growing up?
Pardon?
So when you were growing up, it was the dairy farm?
I grew up on a dairy farm, yes.
Okay.
Sure did. That's the only thing that's really the only thing I ever knew. I went to Texas A&M for 2 years and studied dairy husbandry and dairy manufacturing. From the time I was 9 years old on up, I thought of only one thing, as having the biggest dairy in Dallas, and I accomplished that, and had not only in Dallas, but all of Texas. And when I sold out in 1985, I was the biggest dairy in the state of Texas, and the best, in my books. And I'll never forget, a friend of mine asked me when I started, he says, how are you going to buck the Big Five? There was Big Five dairies around in Dallas. And I said, well, there's one way, work, work, work. And he laughed at me with what I said, work. Of course, it isn't only work. It's intelligent effort. Got a lot to do with it. But my brother dropped out in 1959, and I went forward with it until 1984 when I decided to sell. I had 4 children, and I decided that they weren't qualified to run it in case something happened to me. I was 67 years old actually when I sold out. That my wife would have a problem on her hand, and the best thing for me to do is dispose of it before that happened, and that's what I did.
So let's go back a little bit to your childhood, when you were growing up.
Yes.
What about the school? Where did you go to school?
Well, in the beginning it was a little country school called Bonneview School. And in 1930, they closed it down, and I had already completed 6 years there, and I completed half a year in John Henry Brown in South Dallas, and then went to Horse Avenue High School for 3.5 years. And June of 1934, I became a graduate of high school, 16 years old, and started A&M the following September.
So what kind of activities did you do as a teenager?
Beg pardon?
What kind of activities did you do as a teenager in school?
Activities.
In school?
The best I can tell you is I worked. When we got up in the morning, we had cows to milk and had feed to haul in the afternoon. It was just work all the time. My dad taught us well.
Did you go to synagogue?
Sure we did. I was born and raised in Sheriff Israel. I've been a member there now for 59 years.
Did you belong?
Where your membership?
I'm a member at Sheriff Israel too.
You are? Yeah, but I don't know Silver. Everybody I knew, nearly everybody I knew has died. And the fact is, I had another friend that was a member there, died just a few days ago. You might knew him. His name was Mort Kessler. I don't know if you knew him or not.
I think
But I know very few people there.
Were you involved with Jewish activities growing up?
Beg pardon?
Were you involved with a Jewish youth group? Any kind of activities?
No, I really wasn't.
How did you celebrate the holidays? How did your family celebrate the Jewish holidays?
Well, my mother always had a big feast I'll get it out in a minute.
Passover? Rosh Hashanah? Break the fast? Not Yom Kippur. Break the fast?
No, we got to start at the beginning.
Okay.
For Passover. And of course, we observe. She told us we're strict Orthodox, and I drifted away from it though. My mother and dad were both not conservative, but
Orthodox?
Orthodox, and the shul didn't change over to become conservative in 1955. Now there's one person that belongs to the shul that I still, back there to talk to him about an hour ago, Dr. Saul Katz. I don't know if you ever knew him or not.
Yes.
But he and I go to lunch every once in a while, and he's 95 years old. He was very active in synagogue. I was not very active, but we always went to shul for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, yes. But I didn't go
Did you have a bar mitzvah?
Huh?
Did you go have a bar mitzvah? A bar mitzvah.
Sure, I had a bar mitzvah, absolutely. No, never forget my bar mitzvah. Summer of 1931, I just had a brother that got killed. A train hit him. His bar mitzvah was delayed, and my parents had the bar mitzvah in the summertime because very few people came to shul on Shabbos, so for in summer times, my dad didn't have to buy much whiskey. So, but while I was studying for my bar mitzvah, and a commotion was going on outside, and the instructor and myself run outside to see what was going on. We were in his home, and a black man had been caught up with by a man on a motorcycle and knocked him down, and a bunch of white people jumped on him. They were looked like it was going to be mob action and kill him. And fortunately, the police got there and saved him. But I saw what mob action could be like as a 13-year-old. But it didn't happen, thank goodness. But white rednecks are bad people.
Do you remember any instances of anti-Semitism when you were growing up?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about them.
I didn't have any problem in the little country school where I went for 6 years. Didn't have any problem at the high school where I went because not most people, but at least 50% of the people were Jewish. And at Texas A&M, the 2 years I was there never was a problem. Didn't hear of anything. And we're talking about on my 15th birthday, that was before I started at A&M. Hitler took office as chancellor. That was January the 30th of 1933, when Hitler took office as the I forget the title he had, but he became all powerful that day. But they really didn't have any problems in school. Our problems came later. And but there was always some little snide remark. You learn to ignore it. One that I always will remember because I think I learned a lesson there. It was a September night of 1927. I know you probably didn't have any interest in boxing, but the second Dempsey-Tooney fight took place. Would you be familiar with those names?
Names, yeah.
Well, Dempsey-Tooney, it was the night of what they called a long count. Anyhow, there was a black grocery owner in Oak Cliff, which was pretty close to where my dad's dairy farm was, invited the older brothers and who took me along too to go listen to the fight on a radio loudspeaker that he had. Very few people had loudspeakers, but he was a well-to-do man, and he offered it, and we went. That day, I was running to go get back into class before it was too late, and another young man was coming around the other corner, and we collided, and I had the side of my face swollen up, eye was black and it was closed, and his lip was cut. And I'll never forget this old black man who owned the store. His name was D. Wolf. there's still a building over there in Oak Cliff's got his name on it. Well, during the preliminary fights, I decided to go get me a knee-high orange. You know what knee-high orange is?
Yeah.
Don't know.
No.
You
Levi's
do.
a brand.
Okay.
Good cold
Soda.
drink. To go get one, I had a nickel and walked in the store and asked Mr. Wolf for a knee-high orange, and he looked at me and my face all swelled up, and he put his glasses down and looked at me. He said, "Bill, the Nike, when you see you can't win, you must run." And I thought that was the best advice I ever got in my life. And I'll tell you a little bit later about when I put it to use.
Well, let's go back a little bit, just for a little bit. You talked about how your parents belonged to Sheriff Israel. Were they involved, very involved with the synagogue, or did they get involved in other Jewish organizations?
Daddy was going to the shul all the time, but he never was involved in the operation of the shul, in selecting the rabbis, and being on the board of directors. No, he never was.
And your mother, were they together? Were they involved in any other organizations?
She belonged to the Ladies Auxiliary, yes.
Okay. Now, you said you went to A&M for 2 years. Did you go on a football scholarship?
Oh, no, I never played football.
Oh, okay.
I tried to become a boxer, but I wasn't too good at it. But I
So,
thought everybody ought to study the art of self-defense, because you're confronted with those things from time to time, and you ought to be ready for it.
when you were at A&M, were you active in any Jewish organizations?
The Hillel Club, yes.
And did you make a lot of friends?
Yes, I did. But I dropped out after second year. I had already been selected as vice president for the third year, which would have led me to become president the following year, but I never did come back. But anyhow, yes, I was in Hillel. I'm still involved in Hillel down there. I pay dues every year, and every once in a while I go to one of their meetings. But I never really was active in Jewish organizations.
Okay. What about, why did you leave after 2 years?
Why did I do what?
Why did you leave college, A&M, after 2 years?
If I had continued on, I would have graduated when I was 20 years old. And if you have to be 21 in order to get commissioned in the Army, and I decided I would stay out 1 year, and then go back and graduate when I'd be 21 years old, and be a reserve officer. Well, anyhow, during that summer, I ran into what I thought was the prettiest Jewish girl in the world. Her picture's up there. You might see it, be able to see it. I can't see it from here. Shirley. Anyhow, we decided that I ought to be out of school and she'd give me the rest of the education I needed. And I got married the following December. And we got married and lived happily for 63 years. And she died June of 01. June of 2000, I meant to say, 6 years ago.
So tell me about the rest of your family, about your children.
What?
Tell me about the rest of your family, about your children.
Yes. Well, I'll start with the oldest one was a daughter. I was my mother and dad's oldest daughter, Dora. She had 3 children. It's sad to say, but they all, her husband died first, and then she had 2 of her children died, then she finally died, and now the 3rd child has died. They're all gone. But she does leave some grandchildren. And the oldest boy, he had a wife and 2 children, all died early. But my brother died after he's 85 years old. His wife died early, and the 2 children died early. Then the third one was my brother Lou, and he got killed by a train hit him, 1931, and he left a wife with 3 children, and 2 of the children are still alive. One of them lives here in Dallas and works at the dairy. He's 81 years old, and the other one lives in Louisiana. His wife passed away in '95, and then there's next one was been my brother Abe, who died in 1970, and his widow died in '99. She's got a lot of children here in Dallas. Her name was Livy, and you might know Anna.
Yes, sir.
What's her name that my sister-in-law Libby's daughter?
Debbie?
Debbie. No, that's her granddaughter. Daughter.
Well, you can think about it. Let's keep going. We'll just put that aside. We can come back to that later.
Here's some water.
Well, anyhow,
It's wonderful.
so they've got 1, 2, 4 different grandchildren left here. And they all flourishing in business around Dallas, yes. Then was my sister Nettie had a husband, 2 children. The husband, she and 2 children, all deceased. They she didn't have too happy a life. Husband was alcoholic. My sister-in-law, Livy, her husband was, my brother was an alcoholic. And then I'll get down to another one who was an alcoholic. But then after Abe and Nettie, she died. I got that. Then I had one brother that he never was on the things. He just didn't want to work, and he was eccentric. And he was a timberlawn. You know what timberlawn is?
Psychiatric hospital.
He was a timberlawn way back in the 20s. And there's, the story goes that he was out there at timberlawn, and a group of social lights were out there looking at see what went on there. And they saw Jake, his name was Jake, was pushing the wheelbarrow upside down. And one of the ladies said, "Look at that fellow, he's pushing that wheelbarrow upside down." And Jake overheard her, and he said, "Ladies, if I turn it right side up, they'll put bricks in it." That's supposed to be funny. Anyhow, it's a family reunion of the Schepps family in 1986. I told that everybody got a big laugh out of it. But anyhow, Jake died in '66. He never did do anything, accomplish anything. Never got married, never had children. But he died. Brother Marr died in 95, and he left a wife. His wife is deceased, and he had an adopted child and wife, and they all are dead now. But he was 87 years old when he died, and had a good life. Then my brother AI, who lives in Houston, is 96 years old, got a wife and 4 children, And one of the children had leukemia when she was 28. She left 4 children, I might say. And they all have done very well in life in Houston. He's very active in the synagogue down there, Bethany Shuren. You might have heard of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He was president one time. He's still active today. And then there was a brother Eli who married and had an adopted child. And they had 2 children, but when he left, is a very wealthy man, but he wasn't active in the synagogue or anything. He did come to say Kaddish. I go to say Kaddish for several members of my family. That's my connection, my biggest connection with synagogue. And to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed in our rabbis down there. I've always been friends with rabbis, especially when we had, going back to all the time when there was Rabbi Weisfield here, had good connections with him, and went to see him quite frequently. And then he was followed by Rabbi, and I was most friendly with this guy, and I can't think of his name right quick. He was here 10 years and he quit in 65 and moved on, and he went back, finally ended up back in Connecticut where he came from. But then after following him was that Rabbi Ofsar, had a real good relationship with him. And after that, we got to Dr. William
Gershon.
Gershon, and I don't know, I started talking to him, and it seemed like his mind is somewhere else, and I can't get any response. I'd like for a rabbi to ask me how many children you got, or something.
I'm sorry. Let's talk a little bit about the dairy business.
Darians.
The dairy industry.
I didn't tell you about all my brothers now.
Well, that's all right. Let's just pocket that for a little bit. Let's get back now, and I want you to
About
talk
the dairy
about your
business.
building up your business.
You want me to tell you about our business?
Right.
I consider myself very innovative. I didn't sit back and wait for other people to lead. I led in the industry. And when other people were sleeping, I was wide awake planning and doing things. And I wasn't liked for that. If you're in business, you got to be in politics. So I was very active in local politics and in state politics. And a little bit, I was a very close friend of Lloyd Benson, who recently died. He and I were good friends. And there was many other figures in Washington that I had befriended over the years, and could boast that I could call them direct in their office and talk to them.
Do you remember who they were?
Yeah. They're not probably the most important one of them all was I said so just a minute ago, was
Lloyd Benson, we mentioned him.
he was from Texarkana, Texas. God almighty, if this is embarrassing, but he was chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee. A very forceful branch of the government. I can't think of his name right quick. I could boast that I knew Hubert Humphreys well. I'm basically a a member of the People's Party, as I said. They don't like to hear me say that, but I'm talking about the Democratic Party. And I lost a lot of friends. Texas used to be all Democratic up until about 1965, and it started switching over the other way. In Washington, I always knew my congressman, and none of them are left up there anymore. If I don't review these names from time to time, they tend to escape me. But John Connolly was a personal friend of mine. If you've ever heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
And then John Tower, he was a Republican. I still managed to keep a relationship going with him, sure did. And getting back here to Texas, I was very close to Governor Bill Clements, a Republican. I have nothing to do with the present administration and the one before him.
Clinton?
I'm talking about the president now. I never have liked him, never trusted him, and I think it's unbelievably, he's unbelievably bad. But then right here, we had a governor, well, not John Connolly, but following him was
Is it Dolph Briscoe?
Clements? Was it Clements?
Dolph Briscoe?
Dolph Briscoe. Dolph
Briscoe was in there somewhere.
Yes, I did. I visited his ranch several times. Sure did. Yeah, but there was another fellow. I don't mind.
That's all right. So just tell us about go back to the dairy industry.
Yes.
How did your all of these friendships, and did you work on legislation that impacted the dairy business?
There was things that had to be passed, legislation to help the industry and correct some problems. And all my good friends that belonged to Dairy Products Institute, they wanted to go to Austin, have a big convention, everybody drink and have a dance and all that. They didn't know anybody, and I knew people, and I got things done. We needed some legislation to control the loss of milk cases. That don't mean nothing to you, but milk cases at Schepps Dairy, when I sold out, every morning when you put the key in the door, I knew I had $1,000 loss that day. The milk cases that people are going to steal, they're going to use them to store their books at home and store whatever junk they might have, and take your cases. And anyhow, I got the bill passed, and then it was repealed after I got out of the milk business. Then there was a time when they were charging tax on Eskimo pies and other
Frozen snacks.
novelty items that were ice cream, not those ices. Anyhow, I went to work on, and he was one of my best friends ever. Bullock, John, Mr. Bullock, he and I got a lot of things done down there. And there was a Jewish fellow that was his AA, a fellow named Harmon now, that I worked with very closely, and we helped in a lot of other areas. And so we got the law repealed where they're taxing Eskimo pies and other food items. They shouldn't be taxed. But when it comes to the ices, they should be taxed. They're not food. But anyhow, those are the kind of things. And there was many other things that came up in the house. You have to watch for all the time. There's always laws being passed that had no public interest, but selfish interest by the automobile industry. They passed a bill many years ago. Said anybody that buys a new car got to pay the dealer $25 just to register the car for you. They've been doing it all since the time one, but free. They want to sell the car, but all of a sudden they pass a law. You got to pay $25 to get this car registered. Well, there was no public interest there, and there should not be any legislation passed that wasn't of public interest.
Were you involved locally in starting programs like Crime Stoppers? Tell us about that.
Crime Stoppers? Yes, I helped organize Crime Stoppers here in Dallas. And there was another one called Metro Crime Council. I helped organize it also.
Tell us what that was and what you did.
What?
Tell us what those programs were and what you did.
In 1973, I had a company called Schepps Food Stores, convenience stores. And I had an employee that was shot, killed, 1 o'clock in the morning in a robbery. And I'd never had anything like that happen to any employee before. But when the telephone switchboard opened at Dallas Morning News, I got a hold of somebody there and told them, no, that was not my first call, I beg your pardon. I called first the Dallas Police Department. And I talked to a man with the police department who handled PR work for him. I told him who I was and that one of my employees had been shot, and I wanted to offer a reward for the capture capture and
Conviction. Yeah.
no, capture and indictment.
Oh, indictment.
That's the big difference.
Okay. Big difference, yeah.
Capture and indictment of the person that killed Mr. Moon. And I said, if you want my help, I'm ready to make this offer and put an ad in the paper as soon as the morning news opens up. They called me back shortly later and said, we need your help. That's right. So I got a hold of the Dallas Morning News and put the ad in the paper. We had results in that thing within 24 hours. It was an interesting story. And everybody said, well, how can you do that just for indictment? You might not get a conviction. Well, everything's a gamble in this world. You got to take a gamble. I'm in business about this matter because I need to show my employees if something happened to them, we do something about it. That's one thing. Of course, the news media, some of the news people, they try to show that we were doing it as an advertising gimmick. Well, I thought about an old Abe Lincoln yarn. Abe Lincoln was riding in his buggy with his law partner, a fellow named Herndon. And they got into a friendly argument about whether man does anything in life that isn't selfish. Lincoln said everything we do is selfish. Herndon says no, it isn't. When they came upon a pig caught in the fence, and the pig was jerking and and trying to get loose and was squealing, and I don't know if you heard a pig squeal or not, but I have. And anyhow, Lincoln stopped his buggy and got out and got dirty and filthy and got the pig untangled, and the pig took out across the field, free again and squealing and happy again. And he got back to the wagon and tried to clean his hands and boots up a little bit. Vernon says, "See there, that was not a selfish act." And Lincoln said, "Yes, it was a selfish act." "Well, how do you do that? How do you figure it that way?" So, well, if I hadn't got that pig loose there, and I went to sleep tonight, and I thought about that pig still caught in the fence, I wouldn't have been able to sleep tonight. So it turns out to be a selfish act. He damn sure he was able to sleep. I think it's a real good story myself. So most people I tell it to are not very impressed by it. But anyhow, we got results almost immediately, but there's some other interesting parts to it. A black man called me and said he's ready to tell me who did it, and if I'd give him some assurance he's going to get the $5,000. So he agreed to meet me downtown on the corner of Hervey and Bryan Street at a certain time that evening. I told him I was bringing 2 policemen with me. I wasn't coming alone. He said, "Well, I want to talk to policemen." Well, I said, "You don't need to. They'll sit in the car, and you and I will walk around the back of the car." I ended up writing him out. I always carry this pocket planner here. I wrote him out a promissory deal that I would pay him if the information he gives me leads to their arrest and indictment. And 2 days goes by, the police department could not make an arrest on the information that he had given me. Now, he had told me that one of them's name was Smith, and the other one was Robinson, and the third one, he wasn't sure what his name was. But he said he had graduated Forest Avenue High School with that fellow named Robinson. Well, another 2 days went by, and they hadn't made an arrest, and a black girl called me up. She said, I can help you catch these people if you give me some money." I said, "Well, who are you?" She said, "Well, I know all 3 of these guys." And so I agreed to meet her on Forest Avenue. It was still called Forest Avenue in 73. Right across from Forest Avenue High School. It had already changed its name by that time, though. At a certain time, she would be using the telephone inside of an A&P store. So I told her what I'd be driving, and she told me what she'd be wearing, and I pulled up to it, and she saw me. She hung the phone up and come over and got in the car with me. And this is funny, but she jumped over from the driver's side, from the passenger side, next to me. I said, "Get over there, you don't belong over here." She said, "Well, it's commonplace white men come over and pick up black girls." I said, "I don't give a damn what commonplace it is. You get over there, we'll talk business." Anyhow, she said, "I know these 3 guys, and if you'll promise to pay me some money. Anyhow, I ended up promising to give her $2,500. I didn't have to write anything out. If she'd lead us to them. All right, she said, okay, at 7 o'clock tonight, they'll be at my house on Jeffrey Street, which is right around the corner there. 7 o'clock that night, the police surrounded the place. A few minutes after 7, and they got them, all three of them. And I paid her $2,500, and the other fellow got $5,000. And that was the beginning of our
Crime
reward
Stoppers
system.
reward system. And so how long did you continue that program?
I continued it right along, but right away I decided this is having a good effect. I'm going to start offering it in case where any customer of ours is
Hurt?
is a victim of a crime. And we did that for a while, and then I decided I'm just going to offer it where anybody is a victim of crime, providing it isn't a crime involving two dopeheads fighting one another, or two guys fighting over a woman, or whatever it might be. But we had some conditions for it, and it grew. And Kay is very effective, and it was very productive. It was good for Schepps Dairy, yes it was. And I'm real proud that I thought of the idea, but the main thing was offering it not for conviction, but for indictment. And I knew I had the power at the courthouse at that time in 1973, and even still further, that I could, Henry Wade was the district attorney who I could reason with, and if a case was, if the police department completed an investigation and they turned it over to the DA's office, I could get the DA to turn it over immediately to the grand jury and get action on it immediately. And the people that were doing the bad acts were found out. These things could happen fast at the courthouse, and I'm sure proud I got into it.
So tell me, you had a very successful business, and you've had a very long and successful career. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I'm most proud of the fact that at 9, 10 years old, and I sat out on that limb over the water at Cedar Creek and throwing rocks in there, and I was thinking about having the biggest dairy and the best dairy in Texas or Dallas, and it came true. And it was a result of two things: hard work, intelligent effort, and that, of course, that doesn't spell out, but there were a few things that I always followed, and I tried to teach this to my subordinates. You must always be sensitive to the needs of the people around you. We're talking about, of course, families is first always, but then there's the employees, the customers, the stockholders, and the public, the suppliers, I meant to say. And that's I'm a firm believer in that. You must be sensitive to their needs. You can't approach these things selfishly, and pardon me just a minute, it's hurting there a little bit, but anyhow, that would probably be the capstone of my life, yes. I accomplished what I set out to do. But there was other things that entered into the fact of why I got other people. I always remember one thing that an executive with the General Motors said. The accomplishment is what gives us a zest for living. And if you let your employees accomplish things, you might give them a tip or two and let them move on their own. Let them use their own brain, and they can sit back and say, God, look what I did. That is very, very important. You got to find a way to get the best out of people by doing those kind of things. And don't ever try to steal anybody's thunder. When they accomplish something, be sure they get credit for it.
Did you have any role models?
Did I have any role models? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Oh, there's so many of them. Let's start with Moses. Yes, I did. Yeah, I've studied about a lot of different people in this world. One of the people that I was amazed with was, of course, is Einstein. Then I get a tape about his treatment of his first wife. And I kind of got off of him. He was bad. He was a bad person. But he still gets the credit.
Well, let me just ask you one quick question since we're getting to the end of the tape. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you feel is important to discuss?
There's something that we didn't talk about. Well, I think about my success because I made some very wise choices in my life. First wise choice I was my wife. No question about that. And I think, and I don't think, but firm belief in God is very important to me. I don't believe in hereafter and on that bit bar stuff, but I certainly believe in God, and what good things I've done in life. I never have done one thing in my life that I thought this is going to buy me a seat in heaven. Never. There's been a lot of different things that have come up in my life, helping individuals that I'm very proud of. And a lot of them I wish they hadn't done because they're a bunch of ingratiates out there in this world. But that goes with it. You can't win them all. I was on the grand jury one time. That was 3 months of work that I wouldn't have taken for. That happened 7 years before I offered the first reward. And either one of you had ever had an opportunity to serve on the Dallas County grand jury?
No.
If you ever have an opportunity to do that, because it'll open your eyes to what really goes on in this world. See man is we're very best, and some of see man is very worst. And you ever eat barbecue?
Absolutely.
Huh?
Absolutely.
Where,
Yes.
What's
Yes.
your favorite place?
Dickie's.
Dickie's? I'm glad you said that. One case we had before the grand jury, Mr. Dixie was probably 65 years old then, so I'm sure he isn't alive. He said, he got on the witness stand and said, gentlemen, I don't want to prosecute this boy. said he's 18 years old, never been in trouble before. And he used a little bit of my gasoline, didn't harm the car in any way. And I'd like for y'all to spank his hand and send him on his way. Let's give him another chance. That was the best thing I saw on the grand jury. And I appreciated him. I never got a chance to say to him personally what I thought about it. But I'm sure that he was a man of good reasoning. He probably felt about himself the same way I felt about it. But there was, and I did some things on the grand jury that others didn't bother to do. After you hear all the evidence in the cases, the assistant DA makes his recommendations. You can listen to him or you don't, but most people listen to the assistant DA. But there was a case where two black fellows, you guys are 6'2" and brothers, they're in their early 30s, and they stopped at a bar to have a drink, a beer, and they were charged with murder. And I heard the case, and the assistant DA said they deserved an indictment. He was charged with murder and tried. But when he walked out of the room and we come to that case, I told people, I said, not me, I'm not going to agree to that. They did kill a man, but the man deserved killing. He asked to be killed, I'd say. And I take great pride in myself. I put them two guys on the ground that afternoon. Because I followed through. If I hadn't followed through, they'd have to wait till Monday. But anyhow, they were. Then there was another one that's where my dad got her pregnant.
We don't need that all the
Honey,
time.
here's a handkerchief for you. There's some water beside you if you need it.
I want to ask you one more question. You told us about the one incident where you witnessed a black man being discriminated against. Did you personally were you a victim of any kind of discrimination against you?
Yes.
Yeah.
1941, I moved to 2nd Avenue. It was a hotbed of anti-Semitism, the whole street was.
And where were you moving from? Were you moving from the dairy
I
farm?
moved from 8th Street, and I moved to 5200 block of 2nd Avenue. That's where my dairy was for 9 years. And every morning I'd go up to a little place called Liberty Castles and have coffee and a donut. And I walked in, there's loud music. It was a small place, just stools in it. And there was one stool left open, and there's loud music, and soldier back there. He was taller than me, and this would have been '42, yes. Anyhow, he saw me walk in, he realized, he knew right quick by my nose I was Jewish. He said, "Tell me what the Jews are good for." I turned around and I said, "You step outside and I'll show you." I had taken boxing lessons in my younger days and did a little boxing at A&M and at the YMCA here in Dallas. I wasn't the meanest guy in the world, but I could defend myself. And I knew how short guys are supposed to fight the tall guys. He'd fight on the inside, not arms length away from him. But anyhow, I got him outside, and I was getting the best of him. And he had 3 buddies that saw that he needed help, and they all 4 jumped on him. And when it was all over with, they got through beating me. I was laying on the ground in the street, and they stomped on me and kicked me in all parts of my body. And finally one of them said, "Say Jews are no good and we'll let you loose." And I remembered what that old black man advised: when you see convene, you must run. And I'd like to tell this story to the President of the United States. And anyhow, I said Jews are no good. And I laid there at least a minute before I could compose myself, get up and get in my car and drive away. I got even with that soldier. 10 or 12 years later, I saw him alone somewhere. And I got my payback. I gave him the payback rather. But anyhow, I had a series of fights out there on 2nd Avenue. Every time you turn around, it's something, Jew this and Jew that. I had one tenant on a house that I rented out. And this guy started fighting with me, and I whipped him. Whipped him twice. And I tried to get it over with. But he came running after me with a knife in his hand. Somebody hollered, "Knife, knife." And I ran inside my house and got a shotgun and shot him. And they charged me with assault to murder. I just barely got some BBs in the back of his head, and little blood was trickling down the neck of his back. And I got indicted, and that kept me out of the Army.
Oh.
Not that I was seeking a way to get out of the Army, but it did. And I'm still trying to recall the name of chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee. And I know his name as well as I know him on his AA was named, Baron Shacklet was his AA's name, administrative assistant. And his AA and I had a relationship. We talked on the phone until he finally died about 7, 8 years ago.
So was that it? Were there any other instances of discrimination? What about when you went away, when you were at A&M?
None at all. Never heard one incident of it. Not one incident. It amazed me, and it was most pleasing to me. And today they're more subtle. They don't tell you, but you can sense it. You sure the hell sense it. There's no question about it.
What about in the course of your business?
Huh?
What about in the course of your business? Do you feel that you were discriminated against at all?
In business, yes, ma'am. Glad you asked that. In 1959, I bought a dairy here that was in business for many years called Triangle Dairy. And they had a lot of good customers, especially in the downtown area. One of them was the coffee shop in the Republic Bank building. Mm-hmm. And anyhow, I bought Mr. Schenkel out, and we had a very good, close relationship. And after a few days, this particular customer quit buying our milk, and I asked Mr. Schenkel to go see him. Mr. Schenkel came back and said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but he's said that he just doesn't ever deal with Jews." I couldn't talk him out of it. So I lost the customer. I used to think I could put a curse on somebody and it would happen. I didn't put a curse on him, but I didn't say anything nice for him, but it wasn't 2 months later, he and his wife were going somewhere. They had an accident, both of them got killed. Wilson was his name. Yeah, I know that in business, absolutely. But it was amazing how many Gentiles did buy milk from me. And I found one dairy that we competed with would tell our customers, see, you don't do business with Jews, do you? And some of them would laugh it off, and some of them, and I'm sure that some of them might have listened. But there was a funny, it wasn't a funny thing, but in 1951, I'd called my dairy Pure Milk Company for 8 or 10 years because my dad sold raw milk all the time, and when I first started out, I sold raw milk. And when we switched to pasteurized, I was afraid that people might think it's raw milk, and we need to call it something else, so we called it pure milk. Then in '51, I switched over to Schepps Dairy again. And the sales manager for the boarding company, who I was close friends with, red-faced Irishman, and a guy that you might think was a redneck. But I found out differently about him. But he called me up and said, "I need to tell you something." He says, "Schepps, this would have been in the early '50s. Said you ought to be smart. Don't change the name of your dairy. I hear you're going to change it. So you just don't know how many people out there don't want to do business with Jews." And I said, "Mac, those that don't want to, I want to know who they're dealing with. They want to buy my milk, and I'll keep them happy, and I'll keep myself happy." And we called it Schepps Dairy. We bucked the traffic. Anyhow, and I'll tell you a little funny story. 100 years ago, I think it sounds like to me, there was 3 stores owned by a fellow named Myers. There's Abe Myers, and he had 2 brother-in-laws. One of them was Adolph Stoop, and the other one was Levine. And each one of them were managers of stores. And I happened to be delivering milk at the store in Oak Cliff, close to the Sunset High School. when I was putting milk in the box, and the lady walked up and reached over and got a gallon jug of Schepps milk. Another lady pushed a different buggy, but was with this lady, said, "I wouldn't take that milk. That milk is a Jew's milk." And Adolph Stoop overheard her. He said, "Lady, I always thought milk came from a cow." And she shot out of that store. I'm sure she never came back. But it was interesting stories. Then there's other stories you hear. There's a fellow here. I rarely ever see him anymore. He's been retired 15, 20 years. Made a lot of money and retired. Well-to-do. I financed him in his first restaurant. And as he as he, as, just a minute, I'll get. As he was along the line, I had a nephew I was trying to help in the insurance business. And when I helped Jack Soseby in the milk business, I asked him to give his insurance business to my nephew named David Schepps was his name. And he did. So he had a friend. Of course, Jack Soseby not Jewish. He had a friend came to him and said, I'd like to get your insurance business, Jack. He said, no, I'm going to give my insurance business to David Schepps. He said, you're going to do business with a Jew? He said, yeah. He said, let me tell you something. I asked half a dozen Gentiles to help me get in this business. Not a damn one of them provided me with a nickel. But a Jew boy named Harmon Schepps did. And he asked me to give his insurance business to his nephew. I did it. That was it. But anyhow, it was very comforting to me. There's always some people that are level-headed. Sure was.
Well, thank you. I think is there anything else that we didn't touch on?
Huh?
Is there anything else? I'm finished with my questions. Is there anything else that you want to add to this interview that we didn't touch on?
Oh, I could go on stories after stories, but my banking connections were with Mercantile Bank. But I really don't think of anything else. I'm very unhappy. I can't remember the name of the congressman from Texarkana who was so much help to me.
Well, you can call us and let us know when you remember.
Okay.
I mean, I know that there was a particular congressman that was well known from Texarkana, and I can't think of his name either. And it's probably the same guy. I just can't think of it either.
This man died in the mid-70s.
Okay.
It'll come to you.
I went to his funeral, and there was the Wright Amendment.
Oh.
Mr. Wright
Jim Wright?
made the
Fort
eulogy
Worth.
for him in Texarkana. Wright was a
I want to say
congressman
Sam
at the time
Rayburn.
too.
Sam
But,
Rayburn. He
still
wasn't
can't
from
think of his name.
Okay, see? You're just that
Yes.
way.
He should be an easy
Some of the
man.
big ones, but.
Well,
All right.
thank you very much. This has been very informative.
If you think of some loose ends, we'll talk about them more later date.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, Harmon.
Talking to you ladies, I didn't think about my ailments much.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's better than letting them bother
That's
you while
the
you're
best
talking.
medicine that you
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to end the tape
You
now.
didn't even talk about Schepps bread or Schepps